My 18th birthday should have been special. Instead, my stepmother Linda stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her, my father avoided my eyes, staring at the floor like it held all the answers. "And, you're an adult now," Linda announced coldly. "It's time you learned to stand on your own feet. You have until Sunday to find somewhere else to live." My heart dropped into my stomach. "But Dad, this is my home. I'm still in high school." Dad finally looked up, his face tired and defeated. "Linda's right, Anne. You need to become independent. We've already packed your things." He gestured weakly toward 2 battered suitcases by the door. I stared at them in disbelief. 3 months before graduation, they were throwing me out like garbage. Linda's 2 sons, Jake and Marcus, would keep their rooms, of course. They were her precious angels who could do no wrong. "Where am I supposed to go?" I whispered, fighting back tears. Linda shrugged. "That's your problem now. You're 18. Figure it out." The cruelty in her voice cut deep. I dragged my suitcases to the bus stop, my entire life reduced to 2 bags of belongings. The evening air was cold, and I had nowhere to go. My best friend Sarah lived across town, but her parents barely tolerated me visiting, let alone moving in. At the youth shelter downtown, a kind woman named Mrs. Rodriguez explained the rules. "You can stay up to 30 days while you get on your feet. There are job training programs and counseling available." My small room had a single bed, a tiny desk, and a window that looked out onto the busy street. I sat on the thin mattress and finally let myself cry. Everything I'd known was gone, my room, my family photos still hanging on the walls, even my childhood stuffed animals. But as the tears dried, something harder took their place. Anger. Determination. They thought I would fail, that I'd come crawling back begging for forgiveness. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. College scholarships. Part-time jobs. Anything that would help me survive and prove them wrong. I wouldn't just survive this, I would thrive. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. The diner on 5th Street wasn't glamorous, but Rosa, the owner, hired me on the spot. "You look like you need this job more than it needs you," she said kindly. "Work hard, be honest, and we'll get along fine." I worked every evening after school and weekends, serving coffee and burgers to truckers and night shift workers. The tips were small, but every dollar mattered. I also found a weekend job cleaning offices downtown. School became my sanctuary. My grades had always been good, but now I threw myself into studying with fierce determination. While Jake and Marcus were probably playing video games in their comfortable rooms, I was in the library until closing time. Mrs. Patterson, my English teacher, noticed my dedication. "Anne, you're working harder than I've ever seen. Is everything all right at home?" I couldn't tell her the truth, that I was living in a shelter, working 2 jobs, and surviving on determination alone. "Just focused on my future, Mrs. Patterson." She smiled. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You have real potential." Her words gave me strength when exhaustion threatened to break me down. 3 months into my new life, Mrs. Patterson called me aside after class. "Anne, I've submitted your name for the Morrison Academic Scholarship. It covers full tuition, books, and living expenses for 4 years." My hands shook as I held the application packet. This could change everything. The essay questions were challenging, but I knew exactly what to write about: overcoming adversity, finding strength in struggle, refusing to let others define your worth. I spent weeks perfecting my essays, writing about my experiences without sounding bitter. Instead, I focused on growth, resilience, and dreams for the future. Rosa let me use the diner's computer after hours to type and revise. The scholarship committee interview was intimidating. 5 stern-faced adults in suits asked probing questions about my goals and challenges. But I spoke honestly about my situation, my work ethic, and my determination to succeed. "Why should we choose you over hundreds of other applicants?" the head of the committee asked. I looked her straight in the eye. "Because I've already proven I can succeed against impossible odds. This scholarship won't just help me, it will unleash my potential." 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Full scholarship to State University. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. Campus was overwhelming at first. Students complained about cafeteria food while I was grateful for every meal. They whined about small dorm rooms while I appreciated having my own space again. My roommate Jessica was nice but couldn't understand why I worked 2 part-time jobs when I had a full scholarship. "You should be having fun, Anne. Join a sorority, go to parties." But I had bigger plans. While others partied, I studied business and finance. I joined the investment club and learned about stocks, real estate, and building wealth. Professor Williams became my mentor, seeing potential in my questions about property investment and business development. Every semester, I maintained a perfect GPA while working at the campus bookstore and tutoring other students. I saved every penny I could, building a small emergency fund that grew steadily. Back home, Jake had dropped out of college after 1 semester, and Marcus was barely passing high school. I heard this through Sarah, who kept me updated despite my family's attempts to erase me from their lives. They never asked how I was doing or if I needed anything. Their indifference only fueled my determination to prove them wrong. By junior year, I had saved $3,000 and learned enough about investing to make my money grow. I bought my first stocks, small, careful investments in companies I researched thoroughly. Some gained value, others lost, but I learned from every decision. Professor Williams recommended me for an internship at Henderson Financial, a local investment firm. The pay was excellent, and I absorbed everything like a sponge. My supervisor, Mr. Chin, was impressed by my dedication and quick learning. "Most college students just want to get by," he told me. "You actually want to understand how wealth is built. That's rare." During winter break, I stayed on campus and worked extra hours. Other students went home to family celebrations, but I had nowhere to go. Instead, I spent Christmas Day reading investment books and planning my future. Sarah visited once, bringing news from home. "Your dad asks about you sometimes," she said carefully. "I think he regrets what happened." "If he regretted it, he would have contacted me himself," I replied. The anger had cooled into cold determination. I don't need their approval anymore. But deep down, their rejection still hurt. Senior year brought new opportunities. My internship became a part-time position with Henderson Financial, and I started learning about real estate investment. Mr. Chin showed me how to analyze properties, calculate returns, and identify good deals. "Real estate is where real wealth is built," he explained. "Stocks are good, but property gives you leverage and control." I began studying the local housing market obsessively. Property values, neighborhood trends, foreclosure rates, I absorbed it all. My savings had grown to $15,000 through careful investing and relentless saving. One afternoon, Mr. Chin mentioned something interesting. "There's been an uptick in foreclosures in the Maple Street area. Some good properties might come up for auction soon." Maple Street. My old neighborhood. Where my childhood home sat with its blue shutters and rose garden that I had helped plant years ago. The house where Linda and my father still lived, where Jake and Marcus enjoyed the comfort I had been denied. "How do property auctions work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Mr. Chin smiled. "Interested in becoming a property investor already? You'd need cash and nerves of steel, but it can be very profitable." I began researching property auctions with intense focus. Graduation day arrived without fanfare. While other families celebrated together, I walked across the stage alone. But I didn't feel sorry for myself anymore. I had my degree, a job offer from Henderson Financial, and a growing investment portfolio. More importantly, I had just discovered something that made my heart race with possibility. Through my access to foreclosure records at work, I found it, 1247 Maple Street was scheduled for auction in 6 months. My childhood home. My father and Linda had fallen behind on their mortgage payments. I dug deeper into the records. Dad had refinanced the house 3 times, pulling out equity for Linda's expensive renovations and her son's failed business ventures. Now they owed more than the house was worth, and with Dad's reduced hours at the factory, they couldn't keep up with payments. The irony was perfect. They had kicked me out to learn independence, and now their financial irresponsibility was going to cost them everything. I started planning immediately. 6 months to save more money, research the property thoroughly, and prepare for the auction. This wasn't just about buying real estate anymore. This was about justice. My new job at Henderson Financial paid well, and I lived like a monk to save money. While my co-workers went out for expensive lunches, I brought sandwiches. While they bought new cars, I rode the bus. Every spare dollar went into my auction fund. Mr. Chen noticed my intense focus on foreclosure auctions and property values. "You're planning something big, aren't you?" I smiled mysteriously. "Just learning the business thoroughly." He helped me understand auction strategies, bidding tactics, and property inspection techniques. I learned about title searches, liens, and legal complications that could affect property purchases. Meanwhile, I drove by my old house every few weeks. The rose garden was overgrown now, and paint was peeling from the shutters. Linda's expensive SUV sat in the driveway, a symbol of the financial priorities that had led to this situation. Sarah mentioned that Dad looked stressed lately, and there were arguments between him and Linda about money. Jake still lived at home at 21, unemployed and unmotivated. Marcus had barely graduated high school and worked part-time at a gas station. The family that had rejected me was falling apart while I grew stronger every day. 3 months before the auction, I had $42,000 saved. Mr. Chen helped me get pre-approved for additional financing if needed, though I hoped cash would be enough. I studied comparable property sales, researched the neighborhood thoroughly, and even had the house inspected discreetly when the family was away. The property was worth approximately $60,000 in good condition, but it needed about $15,000 in repairs and updates. The mortgage balance was $73,000. If I could buy it for $45,000 or less, it would be an excellent investment. But this wasn't really about investment returns anymore. I drove past the house one evening and saw Dad in the front yard, staring at the foreclosure notice posted on the door. His shoulders were slumped, and he looked older than I remembered. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the night they threw me out with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. The sympathy disappeared. Linda appeared on the porch, hands on her hips, clearly yelling at him about something. Even from the car, I could see the stress and anger radiating from both of them. The courthouse steps were crowded with investors, real estate agents, and curious onlookers. I stood near the back, wearing dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, trying to blend in. My heart pounded as the auctioneer began calling properties. When 1247 Maple Street came up, several people raised their hands to bid. The starting price was $35,000. I waited, watching other bidders carefully, just as Mr. Chen had taught me. The price climbed, $38,000, $40,000, $42,000. 2 other serious bidders remained when it reached $45,000. This was my limit for financial prudence, but I had come too far to give up now. $47,000, I called out clearly. One bidder dropped out. The other, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, countered at $49,000. $50,000, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The man hesitated, then shook his head. The auctioneer looked around for more bids. Going once, going twice. Sold to bidder number 47 for $50,000. I had done it. I owned my childhood home. The house they had kicked me out of was now mine. The paperwork took 2 hours to complete. I paid in cash and received the deed to 1247 Maple Street. The house where I had grown up, where I had been rejected and thrown away, now belonged to me legally and completely. The eviction notice would be served tomorrow. The family had 30 days to vacate the premises. I drove to the house that evening and parked across the street. Through the living room window, I could see Linda pacing frantically while talking on the phone. Dad sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Jake and Marcus were probably upstairs in their rooms, oblivious to how drastically their lives were about to change. Part of me wanted to march up to the door immediately and reveal myself as their new landlord. But I had waited 6 years for this moment. I could wait a little longer for maximum impact. The eviction notice would arrive tomorrow. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they had exactly 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The same amount of time they had given me, except I had been 18 with no resources, while they were adults who should have planned better. Justice was finally within reach. I watched from my car the next morning as the sheriff's deputy knocked on the door. Dad answered, and I saw his face crumple as he read the eviction notice. Linda appeared behind him, snatching the paper from his hands. Even from across the street, I could hear her shouting. "This can't be right. We have rights. Who bought our house?" The deputy shrugged and walked away, leaving them standing in the doorway holding their eviction notice. Dad looked defeated, but Linda stormed back inside, probably already making angry phone calls. I smiled and drove away. Let them wonder who had bought their home. Let them panic and scramble to find somewhere to go. Let them experience the fear and uncertainty they had forced on me 6 years ago. That afternoon, I called the house. Linda answered on the second ring. "Hello, this isn't Peter," I said calmly. "I'm the new owner of your property. I understand you received an eviction notice today." Silence. Then, "Anne? And Peter? You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You have 30 days to vacate my property. I suggest you start packing." "This is impossible. You're just a kid. How could you possibly afford to buy a house?" I smiled at the shock in her voice. "I guess I learned independence better than you expected." The phone went silent for a long moment. I could picture Linda's face, probably pale with shock and disbelief. When she spoke again, her voice was shaky. This is some kind of joke. You can't just buy someone's house." "I have the deed right here," I replied calmly. "Purchased at public auction yesterday for $50,000 cash. It's completely legal and final." I heard her calling for Dad in the background. "Bob. Bob. Get over here right now." Dad's voice came on the line, tentative and confused. "Anne? Is that really you? I don't understand what's happening." For a moment, hearing his voice brought back memories of better times, when he used to read me bedtime stories and help with homework. But those memories belonged to a different person, someone who existed before Linda poisoned our relationship. "It's simple, Dad. You fell behind on your mortgage payments, the bank foreclosed, and I bought the house at auction. You have 30 days to move out. But sweetheart, this is our home. Surely we can work something out. Your family." The word family hit like a slap. "Family?" I repeated coldly. "Is that what you call kicking your 18-year-old daughter out with 2 suitcases?" An hour later, Dad's old pickup truck pulled into my apartment complex parking lot. I watched from my window as he sat there for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, he got out and walked slowly toward my building. The knock on my door was soft, hesitant. I opened it to find Dad standing there looking older and more defeated than I remembered. 6 years had aged him considerably. "Anne," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I let him in but didn't offer him a seat. He looked around my small but neat apartment, taking in my business degree on the wall, the financial books on my shelf, the evidence of the life I had built without him. I'm proud of you, he said finally. Look what you've accomplished. College, a good job, buying property. No thanks to you, I replied coldly. He winced. I know we made mistakes. Linda thought, we thought we were helping you become independent. By throwing me out 3 months before graduation? By never checking if I was alive or dead for 6 years? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. You chose her over your own daughter. Dad's shoulders sagged. I was weak. I should have fought for you. But it's not too late. Yes, it is. Dad looked at me with pleading eyes. Anne, please. I know we hurt you badly, but we're family. Blood is thicker than water. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive us. I stared at him for a long moment. 6 years ago, those words might have meant something. 6 years ago, I would have done anything to hear him say he was sorry and wanted me back. But 6 years was too long. Too many nights sleeping in shelters, too many meals skipped to save money, too many birthdays and holidays spent alone. Too many times I had needed a father and found empty space instead. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, I said quietly. That's the actual quote, Dad. It means the relationships you choose are stronger than the ones you're born into. I chose to build a life without you. You chose Linda over me. His face crumpled. Please, Anne. We'll lose everything. Where will we go? I don't know, I said, echoing Linda's words from 6 years ago. That's your problem now. You're adults. Figure it out. The pain in his eyes was real, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. You have 29 days left. Over the next 2 weeks, I drove by the house regularly to watch the chaos unfold. Moving trucks came and went as Linda tried desperately to find somewhere for her family to go. I heard through Sarah that they were struggling to find anyone willing to rent to them, their credit was destroyed, and they had no savings for depot. I saw them loading their belongings into trash bags, probably heading to friends' couches or cheap motels. Linda's expensive SUV disappeared, likely repossessed or sold to raise cash. The rose garden I had once loved was trampled now, destroyed by careless movers and the family's frantic preparations. The house that had once been neat and welcoming looked abandoned and desperate. Sarah called me one evening, her voice concerned. Anne, I know what they did to you was wrong, but seeing your father like this, he looks broken. Are you sure about this? As sure as they were when they threw me out, I replied. They made their choices. These are the consequences. But what if they had nowhere to go back then? What if they were struggling financially and didn't know how to tell you? I considered this briefly, then remembered Linda's designer clothes and expensive renovations. Then they should have sold Linda's jewelry instead of abandoning their daughter. On the 30th day, I arrived at the house with my own moving truck. The family was loading their final belongings into a borrowed trailer, looking exhausted and defeated. Linda avoided my eyes completely, but Dad approached me one last time. Anne, I want you to know how sorry I am. I failed you as a father, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I looked at him steadily. I know you will. He seemed to expect more, forgiveness, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of his apology. But I had nothing else to give him. The time for his regret was 6 years too late. Jake and Marcus loaded the last of their belongings without speaking to me. They had grown into exactly what I expected, entitled young men who had never learned to work for anything. Now they were about to discover what real struggle felt like. As their trailer pulled away from the curb, Linda rolled down her window and shouted, "You'll regret this, Anne. Family is everything, and you're destroying yours." I watched them disappear around the corner, then turned to face my house. My childhood home. The place where I had been rejected was now completely mine. Walking through the empty house felt surreal. My footsteps echoed in rooms that had once been filled with laughter and arguments, love and betrayal. The walls still bore faint marks where family photos had hung, photos that I had never been allowed to take when I left. I found my old bedroom, now empty except for carpet indentations where furniture had sat. This was where I had dreamed of my future, where I had cried the night they told me to leave. Standing here now as the owner felt like completing a circle. The master bedroom showed signs of hasty packing, drawers pulled out, closet doors hanging open. Linda's expensive tastes were evident in the custom wallpaper and elaborate light fixtures, all paid for with borrowed money they couldn't afford to repay. I spent the afternoon making notes about renovations. The house needed work. New paint, updated appliances, modern fixtures. I had the money and the vision to make it beautiful again. More beautiful than it had ever been under their ownership. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming a space that should have always been mine and making it into something worthy of the person I had become. Over the next 6 months, I transformed the house completely. Professional painters removed Linda's garish color choices and replaced them with elegant neutrals. I renovated the kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, turning it into a space worthy of a successful businesswoman. My old bedroom became a home office with built-in bookshelves and a mahogany desk. The room where I had once felt powerless was now my command center, where I managed my growing investment portfolio and planned my next property purchases. The rose garden was completely replanted with my favorite varieties. Every evening after work, I tended those roses, remembering happier times while building new memories. This garden was mine now, and it would flourish under my care. Mr. Chen visited once and was impressed by the transformation. "You've got a real eye for this, Anne. Have you considered expanding into property development?" I smiled, thinking of the 3 other foreclosed properties I was researching. "I'm definitely considering it." The house that had once represented rejection and abandonment was now a symbol of my success and independence. Every room told the story of my journey from homeless teenager to property owner. A year after the eviction, my doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find Jake standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable and much thinner than I remembered. His clothes were rumpled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Hi, Anne," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, not inviting him in. "What do you want, Jake?" I wanted to apologize. For everything. "I know we treated you terribly, and I'm sorry." His apology seemed genuine, but I remained skeptical. "What do you really want, Jake?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Things have been really hard since we lost the house. Mom and Marcus are staying in a motel, and I've been sleeping in my car. I lost my job last month, and I don't know what to do." "So you came to me for help," I observed. "I know I have no right to ask, but you're doing so well, and your family." "Family," I repeated. That word keeps coming up. Where was family when I needed it? Jake looked down at his feet. I was just a kid then. I didn't understand what was really happening. "You were 19. Old enough to speak up if you thought it was wrong." He nodded miserably. "You're right. I was a coward." Looking at Jake standing on my porch, hungry, desperate, and genuinely remorseful, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of something like it. He hadn't been the one who made the decision to throw me out, even if he had benefited from it. "Are you hungry?" I asked finally. Hope flickered in his eyes. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." I led him into my beautiful kitchen and made sandwiches while he looked around in amazement. "This place looks incredible. You've really made something of yourself." "Yes, I have," I agreed. Despite having no help from family. We ate in silence for a while before Jake spoke again. "And, I know this is a lot to ask, but could I maybe stay here for a few weeks? Just until I get back on my feet? I could help with maintenance, yard work, whatever you need." I studied his face carefully. He looked genuinely desperate and humbled by his circumstances. "What about Linda and Marcus?" "They're not talking to me," he admitted. "Mom blames me for not getting a better job, and Marcus is angry at everyone." "And Dad?" Jake's expression grew sadder. He's living in a studio apartment across town. Works double shifts at the factory to afford it. He looks terrible, Anne. Aged about 10 years. I considered Jake's request carefully. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face and let him figure out his problems alone, just as I had been forced to do. But another part of me, the part that remembered the boy who had once helped me build snowmen in this very yard, felt something like pity. Here are my conditions, I said finally. You can stay in the guest room for 3 months. You'll pay $200 a month rent, help with household maintenance, and actively look for work every single day. No drinking, no drugs, no bringing friends over without permission. Break any rule, and you're out immediately. Jake nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Anne. I won't let you down. You already did once, I reminded him. This is your only second chance. Over the following weeks, Jake proved surprisingly reliable. He painted the garage, repaired loose boards on the deck, and kept the yard immaculate. More importantly, he found a job at a local warehouse and started paying his rent on time. Living with him wasn't comfortable, too many memories and too much hurt lay between us, but it was civil. We were like polite strangers sharing space rather than siblings rebuilding a relationship. One evening, he mentioned Dad during dinner. He asks about you sometimes. Wonders how you're doing. He could find out by calling me himself, I replied. 3 months later, Jake had saved enough money to move into his own apartment. He had lost weight, gained confidence, and seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding his life. On his last morning in my house, he lingered over coffee as if wanting to say something important. Anne, I know I can never make up for what happened, but I want you to know, you saved my life. Not just by letting me stay here, but by showing me what real strength looks like. Watching you succeed after everything we put you through, it's inspired me to do better. I nodded, acknowledging his words without fully accepting them yet. Just don't waste this chance, Jake. Not everyone gets one. After he left, I walked through the house that was now truly mine again. In the living room, I had hung my college diploma and photos of my achievements, things that celebrated the life I had built rather than the family that had rejected me. Sarah called that evening with news. Your dad wants to know if he can see you. He's been asking me to reach out for months. I considered this. 6 years of anger and hurt couldn't be erased by Jake's transformation or Dad's belated regrets. But maybe, just maybe, they could be acknowledged and then set aside. Tell him he can call me, I said finally. I make no promises about what I'll say, but he can call. Dad called the next evening, his voice nervous and uncertain. We talked for an hour, really talked, for the first time in 6 years. He didn't make excuses or try to justify what had happened. Instead, he simply apologized and asked if there was any way to repair the damage he had caused. I don't know, I told him honestly. I'm not the same person I was at 18. I've built a life that doesn't include you, and I'm not sure there's room to change that. I understand, he said quietly. But I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished. You're stronger and more successful than I ever imagined you could become. We agreed to take things slowly, maybe coffee sometime, no pressure, no expectations. Linda and Marcus remained out of the picture entirely. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. Standing in my rose garden that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The scared 18-year-old with 2 suitcases was gone, replaced by a confident woman who owned property, had a successful career, and had learned to rely on herself completely. The house around me was no longer the scene of my rejection, it was proof of my resilience. I had taken something that was used to hurt me and transformed it into a symbol of my strength. Some might call what I did revenge. I called it justice. And justice, I had learned, was something you created for yourself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.